you compared C5 to, or like a bill that would make Stephen Harper blush, but then you passed it. You voted in favor of the closure motion and it also going to committee.
I didn't vote in favor of the closure motion.
Oh, you didn't? I just...
No, the closure motion was on the government motion. The government, the government motion was to expedite the timeline through committee and through Parliament. I did not vote for the government. That was a vote at 8:30.
Okay.
The closure motion, there was some confusion in the House in the debate. The closure motion was to just shorten the debate on the government motion itself.
Okay. So
which of course we shouldn't be debating like procedural motions in an unending way, but the substantive content of Bill C5 should be dealt with for a longer period of time in committee. Like I think they're going to start after question period today, and then they're going to go until midnight, and that's the fastest I've ever seen in the 10 years I've been doing this on a pretty substantive piece of legislation.
how long would you like to see it studied for?
Well, it's substantive, but it's short. And so, look, if they're able to make the changes between, as I'm talking to you now, and the end of the day at midnight, if they can make the two substantive changes that I suggested. There are probably other changes that experts would recommend, but as I suggested in my speech, I think it would be warranted to extend sitting for another week and have the committee do, in the course of a week, sit for a few hours every day, and that should be plenty of time to hear from Indigenous rights holders, to hear from environmental experts, to hear from those who are proponents of the bill and say, no, this legislation makes sense the way it is, hear from all different stakeholders and experts, and then do clause by clause and in a more orderly and less rushed way.
The bloc is saying that...
I think so. Yeah, I think so. But look, we'll find out at midnight tonight, right?
The bloc is saying that both Minister Freeland and Minister Champagne were supposed to go to Transport Committee today, and they've cancelled their appearance to talk about C5.
I don't know. I don't know any of the details about that. Yeah.
Is this a political move?
But can I just say, I'm less interested in, like, the committee has precious time, right? So the way that guillotine motion worked is we've got from 3:30 today, basically until midnight tonight, for the committee to conduct its business, to hear from expert witnesses, to hear from stakeholders, and to then go through clause by clause and approve the bill. And so it's if ministers want to attend and explain the bill, so they can have at it. I think if I was on that committee, I would want to be using that time to hear from those who are more critical, have suggestions for improvements, and then to spend as much time as possible going through clause by clause and making those improvements.
At a very just basic level for Canadians who, what the hell is C5? What's your issue with the bill?
Oh, well, so the goal of the bill is sound, right? We want to build good projects more quickly. Of course we do, and that's the object of the bill. That's a good thing. There are other elements of the bill that are good as well. A streamlined authorization process should be welcomed. The challenge with the bill is straightforward, and there are two related faults. One, it gives unchecked power for the government to designate national interest projects, absent that there are example factors, but there's no specific factors that the government must consult with and consider. They can consult any factor and consider any factor in designating a project. In the hands of a conservative government, I would worry a great deal about the ability of government to designate a national interest project considering any factor at all, and not imposing more prescriptive factors for them to consider. The second part of it is when you marry that unfettered discretion to designate national interest projects alongside unchecked power to exclude the operation of any law that would otherwise apply to those projects, you have the potential for undermining any number of important protections, including environmental protections. And look, in some cases, I said in the bill, I want to just be clear, where there's a regulation that doesn't make sense, where a regulation doesn't serve the public interest, where a regulation, there's a greater negative cost that is disproportionate to any positive contribution, yeah, we should do away with that rule. I agree with cutting unnecessary red tape to get things done more quickly, but we should be thoughtful, and we shouldn't give unchecked power. I trust the Liberal government. I've got friends around the cabinet table. Like I don't think they're gonna run roughshod over environmental Indigenous rights. This is a 5-year timeline. This is a precedent we're setting. Do I trust Pierre Poilievre government to protect Indigenous rights, to protect environmental rights, to make sure they're ensuring proper democratic participation in not only the designation, but the how a law is excluded from applying to a national interest project? Absolutely not, right? So we make laws in this place for all future governments of all political stripes, and we've got to be careful when we do so.
Is the law being rushed just in order to fulfill a political campaign promise of passing this law by Canada Day?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing though, right? Because to my understanding, we promised to pass by Canada Day a bill that would break down interprovincial trade barriers. And so part one of the bill does just that, and we should pass it by Canada Day. There's no problem in doing so. Part 2 of the bill is the Building Canada Act, which is similar to Ford's Bill 5 and has these 2 major challenges. So look, hopefully we improve the bill, we fix these 2 problems at committee, and I'm optimistic we'll do so. I don't know, we'll find out soon. And if they do that, then we pass it by Friday and away we go. You know, if it were up to me, we would extend the time and have another week of sitting, and we could still pass it by the House by Canada Day. But yeah, other people might take the view that pass Part 1, which is the thing you promised to pass by Canada Day, and take more time with Part 2.
What's the rush then?
Not a question for me.
Not a question for that bill right now.
As I said in my remarks last night, it was I support the object of the bill, so I supported it second reading. I support a lot that's in the bill, obviously. I support Part 1 of the bill, the Free Trade and Labour Mobility Act. I support a lot of what's in the Building Canada Act as well. There are 2 major problems, and if those problems aren't resolved, then I'm not going to support it at third reading.
Did you expect to see a bill like this from Prime Minister Mark Carney?
I expected us to focus on the economy. I expected us to move quickly to get good projects built. I think, and I said this in my remarks yesterday, I think we're not adequately considering competing public interest considerations, democratic participation in the course of shutting the debate down and certainly curtailing committee scrutiny. I think we should take a little bit more time to make sure we get it right. And I expected a bill that was going to pursue these goals. I think we could improve the process, right? So I think we could improve substantively the process by which the government's going to designate national interest projects, and the process by which the government would exclude or improve, how they cut red tape, basically. What does Parliament exist for? Parliament passes laws, Parliament amends laws, Parliament repeals laws. It shouldn't be up to the government, cabinet alone, unilaterally, absent Parliament, I don't know what law a future government is going to exclude from a national interest project, and I don't know what Pierre Poilievre is going to designate a national interest project if he ever happens to occupy the Prime Minister's office. That causes me grave concern.
Democracy as is, could this bill actually foster further disunity in Canada as opposed to the goals the Prime Minister says he has in mind?
Well, I hope that it doesn't, and I hope that instead, there are good people on the Transport Committee. They're going to be seized with this between now and the very end of the day. And I hope the government's open to significant, substantial amendments. They hear from experts, they listen to experts, and I hope they're willing to listen. If they're willing to listen and collaborate, I don't think we'll get to a place where it creates some sense of disunity. I actually think we'll improve the bill, and we'll have a pretty good bill in place.
Democracy is done in the House of Commons here in Canada. And obviously it moves a lot slower than some people expect. Do you think it's a lot slower than maybe Carney expects for some of his initiatives to pass?
I don't know. You have to ask him, but I will say passing a bill in a week or 2 is a pretty fast process in this place.
Does it feel more boardroom than House of Commons at times?
I don't know. I mean, I would just say on this, there's we've seen shortened debate on different things, and I think rightly the government's point of urgency to say we need to act quickly, we need to move good projects quickly, we need a strong focus on the economy, and pointing to the threat of President Trump. Instead, I would say, of course, President Trump is a threat to economy. There's no doubt about that. But we can make sure we respond to that not only forcefully but also thoughtfully, and we should do both. And we can do both, and we can build a strong and resilient economy without sacrificing Indigenous rights, democratic participation, and environmental protections. Of that, I'm certain. And look, cutting red tape, this is the trick, right? Cutting red tape is worthwhile. What's red tape? And I would say red tape is something that doesn't contribute to the public interest or causes negative costs that is disproportionate to any positive contribution. I know from debating Conservatives for 10 years, they see red tape everywhere. So anyway, thanks.
Oui, ça c'est juste cet après-midi, Mme Freeland puis Champagne qui pouvaient témoigner. Je pense que ce comité-là, les finances.
C'est 5, ça va être le comité des transports.
Avez-vous une idée pourquoi ils ne témoignent pas et ça vous déçoit que les ministres?
Ben, écoutez, je ne sais pas pour quelle raison en particulier ils ne témoignent pas, mais ce qu'on sait, c'est que ce à quoi on assiste avec ces 5, c'est un manque de transparence mur à mur. Pas seulement dans ce qu'on trouve à l'intérieur du projet de loi, mais sur le processus, sur la façon de faire. C'est un déni de démocratie qui est substantiel. Alors que, par ailleurs, les ministres qui sont supposés parrainer et être responsables de ces projets de loi-là, respectivement pour chacune des 2 parties, refusent de témoigner, ça me paraît hautement inacceptable.
Y a-t-il une option possible pour le Bloc, outre les amendements en comité possible?
Bien, on est en train d'étudier toutes les options. Nous, vous savez, ce qu'on veut, c'est que la démocratie suive son cours. Ce qu'on veut, c'est que des témoins puissent être entendus. Le gouvernement se plaît à dire que les Québécois sont en faveur, que les syndicats, que le patronat, que tous ces gens-là sont en faveur. Alors nous, ce qu'on demande, c'est tout simplement et très humblement, on demande à ce que tous ces gens-là puissent venir en comité, puissent venir répondre aux questions, puissent venir nous partager leurs analyses. Et on nous refuse ça. C'est hautement problématique. C'est hautement problématique. C'est un profond déni de démocratie ce qui est en train de se passer au Parlement avec C5.
Pensez-vous que les citoyens sont conscients de ce qui se passe avec le bâillon?
Je pense que les citoyens, présentement, voient le soleil, voient des températures de 30 degrés. Je pense qu'ils ont la tête ailleurs et je pense que le gouvernement, qui est dans bien des égards en lune de miel, je pense que le gouvernement en profite et je pense que c'est hautement irresponsable. Une chose qui est sûre, c'est que pendant que certaines personnes sont en train de se faire cuire un T-bone sur le barbecue, nous, les parlementaires, on est ici, on travaille, on est supposé être en train de faire notre travail en comité et c'est d'autant plus grave que ce que les libéraux sont en train de faire, de nous empêcher de travailler. Alors, nous, on est supposé faire notre travail parlementaire tout le temps. À chaque semaine où le Parlement siège, à chaque jour, à chaque heure où le Parlement siège, on est supposé faire du travail parlementaire. On est payé pour le faire, on est élu pour le faire. Et quand moi, je vois les conservateurs s'allier avec les libéraux pour court-circuiter le processus parlementaire, ils ont le droit, les conservateurs, d'appuyer le projet de loi. Mais de vouloir retirer les droits aux députés d'étudier ce projet de loi-là, à mon avis, c'est unique et aussi unique qu'inacceptable.
Do you want to sit into the summer?
We have to do what's necessary. We have to do what's necessary. Now it's hypothetical at the moment, but we have to do what's necessary to study those bills. We're paid to study those bills, we're elected to study those bills, and we have to study those bills, and we have to do it diligently. And that's what we're ready to do.
Do you think Mark Carney is treating the House of Commons like a boardroom or a corporation where he thinks he can just rush through?
I am personally under the impression that he doesn't fully understand what's the difference between a CEO and a prime minister, and if he thinks he's a CEO, he doesn't understand that he's not a majority shareholder.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you.
Merci.
Merci.
Peut-être juste une réaction sur le rapport du commissaire aujourd'hui de votre part.
Oui. Bien, comme d'habitude, on voit que les recommandations du commissaire ne sont pas respectées. Il y a une augmentation de 37 des plaintes, surtout pour la fonction publique fédérale. Alors, on voit que le droit de travailler en français des fonctionnaires fédéraux est constamment bafoué. Et les libéraux ont l'air à s'en foutre. La nouvelle loi sur les langues officielles et les règlements sont toujours pas mis en œuvre, ni pour la loi sur les entreprises de compétences fédérales. Alors, c'est un peu désolant. On va continuer à travailler. Si la loi 101 s'appliquait au Québec, ce serait beaucoup mieux. On voit le commissaire à la langue française au Québec l'a dit, les institutions publiques fédérales, c'est un des principaux facteurs d'anglicisation dans les milieux de travail.
Je voulais me poser sur C5, il y a des articles dans la loi qui permettent d'exempter les lois fédérales. Est-ce que le Bloc pense qu'on pourrait peut-être, par exemple, si je vous donne un exemple, un VRI ou peu importe, un CN applique pour un projet, pourrait être exempté de la loi sur les langues officielles? Est-ce que c'est
Effectivement, C5 permet ça. Il y a même des gens en Acadie, tout ça, qui sont inquiets parce que la nouvelle loi sur les entreprises de compétences fédérales, dans les milieux où il y a une masse critique de francophones, pourrait tout simplement, des promoteurs pourraient tout simplement être exemptés de... Bien, on va voir, mais je trouve que c'est préoccupant mais la loi n'est pas encore en œuvre, fait qu'on va voir à ce moment-là. Mais effectivement, le C5, globalement, c'est très inquiétant parce que ça permet aux libéraux d'exclure l'application d'à peu près toutes les lois simplement par décret. Alors, ça pourrait être la même chose pour les langues officielles. Merci.
Merci beaucoup. Passez une bonne journée.
There have been some concerns about C5.
What specifically have you heard from, what concerns have you heard?
There have been concerns about what the effect of the legislation could be vis-a-vis other pieces of legislation, and I think there's a sort of a general concern that this may be too much too soon, but I think when we look at what is at the heart of C5, it's putting Indigenous partnership first. In our case, with the Yukon and in fact the other territories, we already have assessment legislation in place. So we have a different context in the territories that will allow for under the modern treaty process, we have robust assessment processes already in place.
Do you think that the government fast-tracking this legislation is maybe inflaming or triggering more concerns about the potential impacts this bill will have?
It's an ambitious timeline for sure, but I think the legislation itself is robust in that it includes, first of all, meeting our climate goals and Indigenous participation at the root of it.
How can the government address the concerns that you're hearing from constituents, though?
I think by over the next few days, aggressive timeline, but I think by continuing this, the emphasis on what the legislation, that this is setting up a framework for allowing for a much more efficient process for assessment, but that inherently respects and works in partnership with Indigenous concerns and meets environmental targets.
Do you support the fast tracking?
I certainly support the bill, and I support the getting it to committee, considering the concerns in committee, and being able to hopefully complete it by the end of this week.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.